Welcome back, everyone, to Bitcoin 2.0. Today's deep dive is going to be a really fascinating one. We're going right to the heart of Bitcoin. We're talking about Bitcoin Core. If you've ever wondered what makes Bitcoin actually tick, this is it. This is like peering behind the curtain, seeing how this whole thing works.
Yeah, it's captivating, especially because Bitcoin Core, it's not just some random piece of software. This is the OG. This is what Satoshi Nakamoto created. It's like the blueprint for all Bitcoin software.
Okay, so help me wrap my head around this. If I think of Bitcoin as a car, what part of that car is Bitcoin Core?
I think that's a really good analogy. It's the engine. It really drives everything. So it creates those nodes that make up the network. It downloads the entire blockchain. It checks every single transaction to make sure it's legit. And you can even use it to manage your own Bitcoin wallet.
Whoa. Hold on a sec. You said it downloads the entire blockchain? You mean every Bitcoin transaction, like since the very beginning?
That's right, since 2009.
Wow. That's got to be a ton of data.
It is. It's massive, but that's part of what makes it so powerful. See, when you run Bitcoin Core, you're basically getting a complete copy of Bitcoin's history right there on your own computer, so you become this, like a full node. You're not just relying on others to verify things for you. You're a direct participant in the network.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So it's like I have my own personal auditor, making sure all the numbers add up.
Exactly. You got it.
But I'm guessing there's got to be some trade-offs here, right? There's got to be some downside to downloading all that data.
Well, you're right. There are some things to consider practically. You're going to need at least 400 gigabytes of storage space on your computer. And just to download it all initially, it could take several days.
Yeah, that's a commitment.
It is. But here's the thing. You're trading a lot of convenience for incredible security and control. You're not relying on anyone else to handle your Bitcoin.
Okay, I can see the appeal in that. But let's rewind a little bit. We know Bitcoin Core has been around since the early days, since pretty much the very beginning. So I'm curious, how has this software evolved over time?
Well, it really speaks to how well designed it is and the community that's behind it. Let me give you a quick history lesson. It all started as a Windows-only program, but they pretty quickly expanded it to Linux and Mac OS so more people could use it. And Satoshi Nakamoto was actually involved directly until about 2010. Then they handed things over to Gavin Andresen.
Wow, so it's had quite the journey.
It has, and it even went through a name change for a while. It was called Bitcoin QT. And at that time, they were really focused on making it easier to use, especially for people who weren't programmers.
A name change, that's interesting. What made them switch back to Bitcoin Core?
It was kind of a signal that they were going back to its roots, to its core functions. And there was also this push to reduce those transaction fees, to encourage people to use Bitcoin for smaller transactions.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, and I think this shows how the project has always been able to adapt. It's always evolved to meet the needs of the community.
Yeah, that makes sense. But speaking of challenges, I remember reading about Bitcoin Core and how they had to ditch this program called OpenSSL. Why was that such a big deal?
Oh yeah, that's a great example of how committed they are to security. See, OpenSSL was being used for encryption, but it turned out to have some pretty serious flaws. There was this one vulnerability. It was called the Heartbleed bug. And it could have allowed attackers to steal people's private keys, which means they could have stolen their Bitcoin.
Oh, wow. So they essentially ripped out this core component and rebuilt it.
Pretty much.
That's a point move. But it makes me wonder, if everyone's relying on this one piece of software, Bitcoin Core, doesn't that make it a potential target? Like a single point of failure?
That's a really important question. It's definitely the elephant in the room when we talk about Bitcoin Core. Because on the one hand, its popularity ensures that everyone's playing by the same rules. But yeah, it does raise concern about centralization. Like, what if the developers were ever compromised?
Okay, now I'm a little nervous.
I get it.
Is there anything that helps mitigate that risk?
Well, the good news is Bitcoin Core is completely open source. That means anyone can look at the code, audit it, even contribute to its development. And this transparency, it makes it much harder for any malicious code to slip through. It's really a global community effort.
That's reassuring.
Yeah.
But it still sounds like a balancing act.
It is.
We need this strong, reliable code base, but we don't want to put too much power in the hands of a few.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's a question the entire Bitcoin community is grappling with. How do we balance the need for this robust implementation with the desire for true decentralization?
Man, this is getting deep.
It is.
So let's say someone's listening to this, and they want to take the plunge. They want to run Bitcoin Core, become a full node participant in the network. How would they even get started?
It's actually easier than you might think. You just got to download Bitcoin Core from their website. It's available for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Then you got to choose a folder on your computer. to store all that blockchain data. Remember, you're going to need a lot of space.
Right, 400 gigabytes.
At least. And then Bitcoin Core will start downloading the entire history of the blockchain, which, like we said, could take a few days.
So I'm basically just watching a progress bar for a few days.
Pretty much.
Not very exciting.
I'll admit, it's not the most visually stimulating process, but what's happening behind the scenes is pretty remarkable. Your computer is becoming a full-fledged part of the Bitcoin network.
Okay, now it sounds a bit more epic.
Right.
So the blockchain is finally synced. What happens next? How do you actually use Bitcoin Core?
Well, once that initial sync is done, you have access to a whole bunch of features. You can send and receive Bitcoin, view your transaction history, even generally new Bitcoin addresses. You can basically interact with the blockchain directly.
Hold on. You're saying I could become my own bank? Like verify everything myself?
That's the beauty of Bitcoin Core. It gives you so much control over your Bitcoin. You're not relying on some third party. You're calling the shots.
That's amazing. But with all this control comes a lot of responsibility. I've got to talk about security. If I'm running a full node and I'm holding my own Bitcoin, what do I need to know to keep everything safe?
Security is absolutely essential, especially when you have control of your own keys. First things first, make sure your computer is locked down tight, strong passwords, up-to-date antivirus software, because if your computer gets compromised, your Bitcoin is at risk.
Okay. Strong passwords, antivirus. What else?
Back up your Bitcoin Core wallet.dat file. That file contains your private keys, which are basically like the passwords to your Bitcoin. So make sure you have multiple backups stored in secure locations, preferably offline.
Offline backups. Got it. Anything else I should be paranoid about?
Be careful about those phishing scams. Never, ever share your private keys with everyone. And if you see any suspicious emails or websites, especially if they claim to be from Bitcoin Core, be very cautious.
Makes sense. But, the more we talk about this, the more I realize how complex it all is. I mean, is it really realistic for everyday people to run their own full nodes?
It's a fair question. It definitely requires some technical understanding, and you got to be committed to learning. But it's getting easier all the time. More resources and guides are becoming available.
So it's like anything else worth doing right. It takes effort, but the rewards are significant.
Exactly. If you value things like privacy and security and having control over your own finances, running a full node is one of the most empowering things you can do in the Bitcoin world.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And it sounds like running a full node, it's more than just a technical thing. It's almost like a philosophical statement about how you view money and technology.
Absolutely. It's like this whole cypherpunk ethos that's at the heart of Bitcoin. It's about self-sovereignty, individual empowerment, resistance to censorship. It's a way to participate in this financial system that's built on trustless, decentralized principles.
Man, that's powerful stuff. But let's be realistic for a second. Not everyone is going to become this full node warrior. So for those of us who are intrigued by Bitcoin, but maybe not quite ready to dive into the deep end, what are the options?
Oh, don't worry. There are tons of user-friendly Bitcoin wallets out there that don't require running a full node. They offer different levels of security and convenience, so do your research. Choose one that fits your needs and your risk tolerance.
Okay, that's good to know. So there's a whole spectrum of ways to engage with Bitcoin. It just depends on how much control you want.
Exactly.
I'm curious, though, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about Bitcoin Core? What do people often get wrong?
One of the biggest ones is that you need Bitcoin Core to use Bitcoin. That's simply not true. You can send and receive Bitcoin using all sorts of different wallets without ever even touching Bitcoin Core.
So it's like saying you need to understand how a car engine works to be able to drive.
Exactly.
What else?
Another one is that Bitcoin Core is slow and clunky. And while, yeah, that initial blockchain sync can take a while once it's up and running, transactions are actually processed really quickly. And the last one I hear a lot is that Bitcoin Core is only for developers or tech wizards. And while some technical know-how is definitely helpful, there are so many resources and guides out there that can help anyone get started.
It's great to clear up those misconceptions. Bitcoin Core is this powerful tool, but it's not as intimidating as it might seem.
Right.
And I'm sensing a theme here. It seems like Bitcoin is all about giving individuals power and control over their own finances. And Bitcoin Core is at the center of that.
You got it. Bitcoin Core is like a testament to the power of open source software and decentralized networks. It allows anyone, no matter their technical skills, to participate in this revolutionary financial system.
This deep dive has been seriously eye-opening. We've gone from the basics of what Bitcoin Core is to its history, its role in the ecosystem, and even some of the misconceptions.
It's been great unpacking all of this with you.
It really has. But before we wrap things up, there's one more thing I want to touch on. The fact that Bitcoin Core is open source, you mentioned that anyone can inspect the code and contribute. How does that actually work in practice?
That's where the magic of collaboration comes in. Bitcoin Core has this global community of developers who are constantly working to improve the software. They propose changes, review each other's code, and ultimately decide which updates get included in official releases.
Sounds pretty democratic.
It is. There are checks and balances to make sure the quality is high and the security is robust.
So let's say I'm a brilliant programmer. I have this groundbreaking idea for Bitcoin Core. How do I get involved?
First things first, you got to familiarize yourself with the development guidelines. They outline the process for contributing code. Then you submit your proposed changes through a platform like GitHub, and then other developers will review it.
It's amazing to think that anyone from anywhere in the world can potentially contribute to something this important.
That's the spirit of decentralization.
It really is. This whole conversation has been incredible, and I feel like we've just barely scratched the surface of Bitcoin Core.
We could talk about this for hours.
I know, right? But for the sake of our listeners' time, let's try to sum things up and leave them with some key takeaways.
Sounds good.
All right, so let's distill this down. If someone's listening and they walk away, remembering just a few key things about Bitcoin Core, what would those be?
Okay, well, first and foremost, Bitcoin Core is like the bedrock of the whole system. It's the original software that powers the entire Bitcoin network. And it's what allows anyone to become a full node, which gives them that power to verify transactions independently and be a part of securing the network.
And we can't forget the history. I mean, this thing was created by Satoshi Nakamoto.
Exactly. It's come a long way since 2009, evolving to meet all the challenges and the demands of this growing Bitcoin ecosystem.
And it's had to overcome some hurdles along the way, like that whole OpenSSL vulnerability.
Oh, yeah. That was a big one. But it shows how adaptable Bitcoin Core is. It's always prioritizing security and user-friendliness.
But like we discussed, that popularity also raises some questions about centralization and how to maintain that decentralized spirit of Bitcoin.
Right, and that's where things get really interesting. It goes beyond just the code itself. It's about the philosophy behind it, the social implications of this technology.
So we're talking about big questions here.
Yeah, like how do we balance individual empowerment with collective security? How do we prevent a single point of failure in a system that's designed to be distributed?
It's like we've gone from the nuts and bolts of Bitcoin Core to talking about the future of finance.
Exactly.
And the very nature of trust in this digital age.
It's all connected.
So for our listeners out there, if you've ever felt intimidated by Bitcoin, remember this. Bitcoin Core is the key to understanding this whole revolution.
Even if you never run your own full node, just knowing how it works gives you this appreciation for how ingenious and resilient the Bitcoin network really is.
And who knows, maybe one day you'll be inspired to become a full node warrior yourself.
It's a journey worth taking.
It sounds like it. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
A huge thank you to you for sharing all your expertise and insights with us.
It's been a pleasure.
And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this adventure into the heart of Bitcoin.
Absolutely.
Don't forget to subscribe to Bitcoin 2.0 and turn on those notifications so you don't miss out on future episodes. We're going to be exploring all sorts of fascinating topics, from the Lightning Network to the philosophy behind cryptocurrency. Until then, keep that Bitcoin curiosity burning bright. All right, so let's distill this down. If someone walked away from this deep dive and only remembered a few things about Bitcoin Core, what would you want those to be?
I think the most important thing is understanding that Bitcoin Core is the foundation. It's the OG software, the one that makes the entire Bitcoin network possible.
Right.
And it's what enables anyone to become a full node, to verify transactions themselves and be a part of securing the network.
Yeah, that's huge. And we can't forget about the history either. I mean, this thing was created by Satoshi Nakamoto himself.
Absolutely. It's come a long way since those early days in 2009. It's had to adapt and evolve to meet the demands of this rapidly growing ecosystem.
And it's faced some serious challenges along the way, like that whole OpenSSL vulnerability we talked about.
Right, but that just shows how resilient Bitcoin Core is and how committed the developer are to security.
But as we discussed, its popularity also raises some interesting questions about centralization and how to maintain that decentralized ethos that's so core to Bitcoin.
Exactly, and that's what I find so fascinating about this whole thing. It's not just about the technology itself, it's about the philosophy, the social implications.
It's about the big picture.
It is. We're talking about fundamental questions here, like how do we balance individual empowerment with collective security? How do we prevent a single point of failure in a system that's designed to be distributed?
It's mind-blowing when you really think about it. We've gone from understanding the nuts and bolts of this software to pondering the future of finance and the very nature of trust in a digital world.
It all comes back to those core principles of Bitcoin. decentralization, transparency, and individual sovereignty.
And that's what makes this so exciting. So to our listeners out there, if you've ever felt overwhelmed by Bitcoin, don't worry, it's a journey. And Bitcoin Core is a great place to start.
Even if you never run your own full node, just understanding how Bitcoin Core works gives you a much deeper appreciation for the elegance and the resilience of the entire Bitcoin network.
Well said. And who knows, maybe one day you'll be inspired to take the plunge and join the ranks of those full node warriors.
I hope so.
It's been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
My pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Bitcoin Core. Don't forget to subscribe to Bitcoin 2.0 and turn on those notifications so you don't miss out on future episodes. We got a lot more to explore. Until then, keep on learning and keep that Bitcoin curiosity burning bright.